Welcome back to Chaos Corner. It's your old buddy, the guardian of chaos, Big Daddy, and I tell it like it is. I'll say that to say this. Another edition of Story Time with the GOC. That's me, here on Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel. Much love and respect to everyone out there and the over 20,000 fans that tuned in last week. Shout out to my moderators, the OTS Tribal Queen and Austin Nance. Coming to you live to tape. One man, unique, unedited, unscripted, raw dog for you, the fans. Sit back and relax as we delve into Story Time. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. December 30th, 2020. Brodie Lee's celebration of life. AEW Dynamite, Daly's Place, Jacksonville, Florida. The welcoming line to AEW's flagship show, Dynamite, wasn't of my creation. Although I was the one with the honor of first using it to greet our audience. You know what that means. Was a line often repeated by a wrestler beloved in our business. One who left us far too soon. Shout out to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Because if He's for us, no one else can be against us. Stay emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually fit, especially in these insane times here in 2024. I don't have to elaborate right now on what's going on in the current climate here in the United States of America. Unless you've been sitting under or laying under a rock, you know what the fuck I'm talking about. So let's move on with Story Time with the GOC. 2020 was a weird year in general because of the global pandemic, or as I say, plandemic, that made a lot of the world stand still. The entertainment business mostly shut down, with musical tours grinding to a halt and movie productions shutting down. Nothing from our world was going on the road. So AEW had two choices. Follow the path and close down just as it was heating up, or take up an audience-less residence in the Jacksonville Jaguars' home of Daly Place and see what happens. Unlike most other touring or live productions, both AEW and WWE are reliant on live performances to fill their live TV slots every week. Wow. Britt Baker, our resident licensed dentist, DMD, had a breakout run in particular after a rocky start where she used the pandemic shows as a reset to focus on sharpening her character and in-ring game to the point where she became one of the shining lights of the whole company at that time. And we know that DMD just returned here in 2024. Not having to live or die on the reactions of the in-house crowd, just having to focus on the cameras and the job at hand helped several wrestlers come into their own. So what seemed like a bad situation initially turned into a great situation as AEW found their groove in this unique environment really fast. New stars were made and the TV ratings began to rise. People were sitting at home, looking for new things to entertain them as they rode out the uncertainty of what was happening around the world. And what better way to take your mind off the awful scenes and headlines of the time than the over-the-top, non-stop action of the professional wrestling world? There's a lot to be said for that, and all of us that lived through that in 2020, all the way till current times, especially 2020 and 2021, I couldn't agree more with that assessment, because business is about to pick up here on Chaos Corner with good old JR. But that time wasn't all celebration and growth for AEW. There was a huge loss mixed in there too. There certainly was. Now, I've lost many friends in this business. Most of them were too young, with far too much road in front of them. A lot of those deaths seemed preventable, as I guess, looking back, it was some kind of substance misuse that took out a lot of our brothers far too quickly and far too soon. It got to a stage in the 90s where every time somebody started a sentence with, "Hey, did you hear about?" I just assumed it was another needless, senseless death. And a lot of times, unfortunately, I was right. A lot has changed since then. Talent now are looking after themselves outside the ring better than I can ever remember. By and large, they knew more about the effects of certain kinds of lifestyles than any generation I've been a part of. As a whole, the touring lifestyle of our business just seems less chaotic than it did in the past. You're more likely to catch our guys gaming after shows than partying nowadays. And that, to me, is a great thing. I don't mind any person letting their hair down and blowing off a little steam in our line of work. But the hedonistic approach of past generations just had a Russian roulette kind of feel to it, where it wasn't a matter of when another wrestler's poor choices would cause them to be taken from us too soon. It was just a matter of who it would be. What a sobering way to start off story time here with the GOC. As I said, that's me here on Chaos Corner. But sobering nonetheless. Little Pellegrino. No, they're not sponsoring me. You guys know that. And stand by. This is a very special episode here on Storytime. I'll be back later on today and through the weekend with more editions of Storytime. Let's get back to the task at hand. Where were we? But sometimes when a young man goes, it's not because of his lifestyle, bad choices, or risky behaviors. Sometimes life just sucks. That's what happened with Jonathan Huber, who was hospitalized in late 2020 with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, a rare type of lung disease that took his life the day after Christmas that same year. Rest in peace, Brodie Lee. John was our TNT champion in AEW, but he lost that title on October 7th and was in the ICU by the end of that month. This was when most of us in the company first heard he was sick. But to everyone's credit, the news never leaked publicly. In this day and age, that's almost impossible with all the geeks and goons and dweebs and nerds and neckbeards and mouth breathers and virgins. And what I say, man, kayfabe, man, lighten up, man. And then, just a couple of months after that, on December 26th, the man who was loved and respected by everybody was gone at 41 years old, leaving behind two young sons, Brodie and Nolan, and his wife, Amanda. 4 days after John's passing, AEW owner Tony Khan turned the whole broadcast of Dynamite into a 2-hour celebration of the life of Brodie Lee, as he was known in AEW, where his friends and family could speak and grieve and remember their friend, husband, and father. I was proud that WWE put aside the usual political tribalism in wrestling and let their talent appear on AEW's tribute to Brodie without any reservations. That man was beloved across the industry, and it warmed my heart to see people from both companies be given the time and freedom to express themselves, because that's what they needed to do to make sense of their hurt and loss at the time. It's so great to hear the hearts being expressed, the feelings, real feeling, not TV persona feelings, but the feelings of human beings. In our business, it's a very rare not to make enemies along the way. And it's more rare to find someone that nobody has had a bad word to say about. That's very true. But John has spoken about the same way and was spoken about the same way. The boys would talk about one of the most universally beloved men in our business, Owen Hart. Owen, like John, died far too young after an accidental fall from the rafters during his ring entrance on pay-per-view in 1999. Long time ago. Rest in peace, Owen Hart. It was one of the most harrowing things I've ever witnessed sitting ringside at that night, and it's never left me. Owen, too, was beloved backstage as a great wrestler, an upbeat presence on the road, and a great father who didn't get involved in all the temptations that a lot of guys did back then. Remember, fans, I'm reading this for the very first time here on Chaos Corner, along with you. The very first time, just opening this up. So bear with me on that fact. John was exactly the same. I can only wish that someday I will be spoken about with half the love and respect that these great men are. I might not get there, but I'm trying to live a life that at least points me in their direction. Both men were always smiling and had a great sense of humor. They understood just how important it was to the industry, like ours, to keep it light on the road, and they took on responsibility for that. To put Brodie in the same sentence as Owen, in terms of just how much he was loved in every locker room he was in, is probably the best compliment I can give. When John came to AEW, I had the pleasure of sitting with him and talking about how he's been a talent that should have been given more time, more attention, and more thought. But this business doesn't get it right all the time. So when he came into AEW, we both knew that this time, and this was his time to shine. We knew that Tony Khan was giving Brodie his own ball to play with in form of directionless faction called Dark Order, and boy, did John make that work. I will say, the Dark Order back then in this time frame was doing pretty damn good, and it was a decent gimmick, unlike what happened after the fact, but that's another story for another time. I didn't realize it at the time, but John's death impacted me more than I wanted to acknowledge. I was focused on getting through the show without my voice breaking and helping AEW tell the world what a great man John was. Before we went on air, I had said to the young guys that it doesn't hurt to laugh because that's how John made it through hard situations. And I'm sure he'd love to be remembered as that guy. After all, that was the rep he had across all the locker rooms he was in. And while he'd won titles in WWE and AEW and was an amazing worker in the ring, most, when they spoke about him, didn't focus on that at all. That's pretty damn impressive. They talked about what a great father he was and how much he loved his family. You can see it in his son, Brodie Jr., who idolized his father and his father's business so much that the two were inseparable on TV days at AEW's home arena in Jacksonville. A lot of the other wrestlers would show Brodie Jr. a thing or two when it came around, and between what his father showed him and the interest the other talent had shown him, Brodie Jr. built up a wrestling acumen far, far beyond his 8 years at that time. So much so that at our New Year's Eve gathering, young Brodie and one of his father's good friends, Adam Cole, did a little spot where Brodie Jr. threw a clothesline just like his father and pinned Adam, and to my delight, hooked the leg while doing so. It genuinely touched my heart. The boy was dealing with his grief through wrestling and being around people who loved him and his dad. I could relate to that feeling. The GOC could relate to that feeling, losing his oldest daughter in 2015. And I don't like to talk to about myself in third person, but you guys understand the tragedies. So if anyone can relate, as can some of you out there right now, just like me, you understand what I'm talking about. We began the night with a 10-bell salute as AEW and the entire roster stood in silent respect on the ramp surrounding John's wife, Amanda, and their young family. We continued with matches and personal recorded messages and wrestlers respectfully mimicking John's in-ring mannerisms and moves. We ended with his boots laid in the middle of the ring by his son. John Brodie Lee Huber wasn't engaging in risky behaviors. He didn't tempt fate or live close to the edge. He was a loving family man who got sick. and that sickness took him from his young family without much warning. I've had the privilege of welcoming many audiences to many programs over the years. But no matter whose voice you hear on Dynamite, now or in the future, it's John Huber who welcomes you now. Thank you, fans, for being here and going through this with me. I'll say that to say this, because I tell it like it is. Don't you dare miss it.